right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the Master of Science in Engineering information session. I'm going to hand things off in just a second to my colleagues in the program, but before we get started, I wanted to cover a couple of housekeeping items. We would love to answer all of the questions that you have. We're going to use the Q&A in your Zoom toolbar to collect those questions and answer them. So you can feel free to submit questions as we go through the session. We'll answer them in the Q&A as we go. But if we feel like there's anything that the larger group will benefit from, then we might save those until the end to answer out loud. So we can go ahead and get started, and I will hand things over to Celinda.
Thank you, Victoria. So Victoria is here from the School of Professional Studies, which supports all of our master's programs at Brown. But myself and some of my other colleagues are joining from the School of Engineering. So I'm the Director of Educational Initiatives in the School of Engineering, but I work with a team of faculty and staff to support our master's students. So here are some of the faculty that support our particular programs. So Professor Eric Chasen is our Director of Graduate Studies in Engineering, but we have a faculty member from each subdiscipline that oversees each branch of the master's program in materials, chemical and environmental engineering, mechanical and electrical and computer engineering. We can go to the next. We also have several other programs that if you're interested in a deep dive in these programs, we'll cover them briefly today, but there are program-specific info sessions available for biomedical engineering, which is supported by Drs. Coulombe and Gray, the PRIME program, which is an innovation and management program, an entrepreneurship program. You can, attend an info session with Pat McHugh and Tina Garfinkel to find more about that. And we have a Master of Arts in Design Engineering led by Beth Aldringer Eagle. And then we have several faculty that staff our data-enabled computational engineering and science programs. So again, I'll briefly go over those today, but there are actually program-specific info sessions available for those, which we can give you info on if you're interested. Next. And then we have a great student affairs team. And so Kathy Diorio and Ann Wang are here today from our graduate program and student affairs team. But some of our other programs have coordinators specific to those individual programs. But there's a lot of support available to Brown students. Next. So to briefly give you an overview of what we're going to cover today, I'm going to go over our program structure and some curricular and program highlights, give you a flavor of our distinct tracks and areas of study and opportunities for research. And then I'll hand it back over to Victoria for some of the application requirements, deadlines, and things like that. And we'll close out with some Q&A. So first, our program structure. We like to say in the School of Engineering that there are infinite possibilities for your graduate work in the School of Engineering at Brown University. This phrase comes in part from this Mobius strip sundial sculpture that sits on the front lawn of our School of Engineering. This was a student-led design project, and it utilizes the sun's position in the sky at 12 noon to tell you the date through an aperture. And the name of this sculpture is Infinite Possibility. But to elaborate a little bit further, next slide, there are truly infinite possibilities to master's programs and graduate work at Brown in the School of Engineering. So there's opportunity to really design your own graduate program. There are some requirements in some of the programs, but you have electives and research experiences that you can tailor to your interests and needs and career development goals. We have a friendly scale and collaborative culture. Everyone loves to collaborate. You're going to work directly with faculty, and there's not a large hierarchy of labs and projects and courses. And there is a wide variety of research and design projects that you can engage in at Brown. So roughly what our master's programs look like, they all require 8 courses, and they can be completed in 1 to 2 years. If you don't complete a thesis, you can most of the time finish in 1.5, with a little bit of flexibility. You can kind of define your timeline. If you choose to pursue a research or design or project thesis, usually that takes 2 years to complete, because we want to make sure you're getting a solid, foundation in the lab, and, completing an independent study, an independent research project. And so that takes about 2 years, but also is 8 courses. And then especially for our international students, to allow for utilization of CPT and things like that, you can engage in a professional track option of the non-thesis program, which will allow for a paid or unpaid summer internship in addition to your 8 courses. For many of our engineering disciplines, there are a couple of required courses that really set down the foundation in mathematical methods. The biomedical engineering program, as well as DECES and PRIME, don't have those requirements, but they have a few others. There are about 3 to 5 courses depending on the discipline. So for example, chemical and environmental engineering have 3 required courses beyond the 2 mathematics courses, but then the other 3 courses in your program you choose, they can also be independent study research credits, if you'd like to enroll in those. So there's lots of options. A few examples of some of the elective courses you can choose to engage in. Brown is known for blending, liberal arts and humanities with science and engineering. So there's a really cool class offered in the spring semester on art fluids engineering. So there's, strong engineering foundations to this, and you study the fluid mechanics of droplets and smoke and things like that, but you also make some beautiful artwork in parallel in this course, and that is taught by Roberto Zenit. If you want to sort of flavor in some leadership and entrepreneurship or organizational skills into your master's program in engineering, we have courses like Banu Pan's Leadership in Organizations course, which you may be able to engage in as an elective in your program. And a final example is a course taught by Professor Bob Hurt, where he really looks across systems, from living systems to the environment, consumer products, biotechnology, at how surface and colloid science really, advances all of these technologies and all of this learning. Again, you can choose to pursue a thesis or not. If you have the option to sort of explore throughout your first semester in the master's program to decide if you want to pursue an in-depth research experience and write a thesis. So you have the first semester to decide that. But you do need approval from a faculty advisor that they'll support your thesis research in their lab if you decide to choose that option. I wanted to go through the variety of research possibilities that might be available to you at Brown. Some of these principles also sort of trickle into coursework, but I'm going to give you a lot of examples of the research labs that folks can engage in as students. So for example, in our material science and engineering group, we have researchers like Lucas Coretta that design and manipulate magnetic, electronic, and optical properties of thin films. He's a brand new faculty member doing really cool work, winning awards week to week. UHE also does a lot of work with energy materials and batteries. And so there are 2 examples of her work in the middle of this slide, where they're looking at glues that help solar panels be more efficient, or safer ways to build batteries from materials that are derived from trees and things like that. And we also have folks like Dan Middleman who are developing tools to better analyze materials and nanoscale technologies. And so that's the blue light technique mentioned at the bottom is an example of that. Next. Our chemical and environmental group is focused on sustainable energy and environmental remediation. This spans electrochemical techniques, catalyst design. They use atomistic stimulations as well as, larger mechanistic modeling. And here are some examples of, times they've been in the news recently for winning big Department of Defense awards, for some awards where they're really looking at PFAS or forever chemical remediation. Some of our faculty are winning international prizes in this research area. So in our applied mechanics group, you have the opportunity to do research to answer the very fundamental questions like, why do champagne bubbles rise the way they do? That's a little bit, intended to be tongue in cheek, but you can really explore anything. I know another group in fluids just this week published an article about the sort of dynamics of belly flops. So, you can really get down to the important things in life with fluid mechanics. But they also study things like how, drag can affect undersea vehicle travel, or how sea ice motion in the Arctic, affects all of the environmental change that we're seeing. So those are some examples of applied mechanics research opportunities. We also have folks looking at solid mechanics in addition to fluid mechanics. And so this is an area that has a long history at Brown. So you can see at the bottom of the slide, there are folks winning, again, large international awards. But there's also new emerging leaders in this area at Brown. So on the top is an example of a new professor named Miguel Besa, who just joined Brown and is really informing mechanics through artificial intelligence. And a recent alum was recently awarded a Young Faculty Prize. Electrical and computer engineering is another area with lots of opportunities. There's, research interests span from, terahertz development technology, silicon, the sort of chips research, CHIPS Act research, robotics, automation, computer vision. There's a wide variety of opportunities to engage in research in computer and electrical engineering at Brown. We also have some of the world leaders in brain-computer interfaces in this area at Brown. Again, like I said before, you can go to a whole info session about biomedical engineering if you'd like to, but research opportunities and coursework really spans from nanoscale to systems in biomedical engineering at Brown. So you have folks looking at nanomaterials or, molecular beacons all the way sort of at the nanoscale, but then you have folks looking at brain-computer interfaces, as I mentioned, but also, ACL repair and artificial wrists at the systems and organ level. And there's a wide variety of applications from cancer to blood vessels and brain disease that, folks are trying to impact in biomedical engineering research. You can also, get further information in a whole info session on data-enabled computational engineering and science. This is one of our newest programs, but it really blends computer science, data science, applied math, but, using these tools to model and simulate engineering applications. And then we also have a Master of Arts in Design Engineering, which is a joint program with the fantastic design school, the Rhode Island School of Design, that really intersects design and engineering and blends those two disciplines together. And finally, we have a master's program in innovation management and entrepreneurship, also known as PRIME. And this really looks at, the steps it takes to bring new technologies to market and to commercialize them, and make them more impactful in the real world. And again, there are info sessions available just about the PRIME program. And with that, that's kind of the structure, research opportunities, and topics you can explore in Brown Engineering. But how to apply to this these wonderful opportunities will be covered by Victoria.
Thank you, Celinda. All right, so let's talk a little bit about how to apply. So first, I want to talk about our review process. We have a holistic review process at Brown. All of our master's programs look at the whole person when they're looking at an application. Of course, there are a number of different requirements, things that you'll have to submit to show us sort of who you are as an applicant, but here are some kind of areas that you can expect us to be thinking about, or the program to be thinking about when reviewing your application. Academic readiness is really important, not just, your GPA. Did you take the coursework necessary in order to be a competitive applicant to the program? If you're applying to a STEM program like engineering, do you have those STEM courses, that STEM background, to show that you're academically ready for the rigorous program that we have at Brown School of Engineering? We like to have students highlight research, work experience, not required, but a nice to have for you to show sort of the type of fit you are for the engineering program. Your goals as they pertain to a Master of Science in Engineering are also important, and you'll communicate those through your personal statement, a really good way to give the application context for the admission committee. Your letters of recommendation as well, they add context to your application. Letters of support from faculty members in particular are really important, especially if you're a recent graduate. But that being said, we accept letters of reference from a variety of different folks who might be able to speak on your behalf. So we'll go to the next. This is a very screenshotable slide for everybody. That's why we did it this way. One of the most important things to keep in mind about the master's application process is it's vastly different from applying to an undergraduate institution. There is no common deadline among programs. One school you're applying to might have entirely different deadlines, entry terms from Brown's program. So make sure you're keeping track of dates, deadlines, and requirements, because requirements might also vary by program you're applying to. To apply to Brown's program, we're going to require you to submit transcripts. So that's your academic history from anywhere that you've attended. For your application, we'll accept unofficial transcripts. However, if you do end up matriculating into Brown, we'll require you to submit official transcripts from everywhere you've attended. We also want you to submit a CV or a resume to show us that sort of holistic experience you have outside of the classroom. Your personal statement, again, really great way to add context to your application. It's also the only opportunity you really have in the application to show us your writing skills. How are you as a communicator? Are you an effective communicator? So make sure you're spending time with your personal statement. You're having other folks edit your personal statement. Make sure there aren't any typos. It's really important to us that our students are effective communicators, because there is a level of writing that you're going to have to do in the graduate program. We require 3 letters of recommendation from all external applicants. A lot of times this can be a sticking point for students, and they'll submit applications with 2 letters of recommendation thinking, oh, that's probably fine. I think one of the most important takeaways from this part of the presentation is we need a complete application in order to be able to release an admission decision to you. So in order for us to really even review your application, we need all 3 letters of recommendation along with everything else on the screen that's required for your program. But I know that letter of recommendation piece can be a sticking point for some students. So just make sure that you're asking for them early and that you're submitting them at the application deadline. If your native language is not English and you have not attended an institution where the native language is English or the sole language of instruction is English, we'll require you to submit English language proficiency exams. And then the GRE is required for engineering, the engineering SCM, but not necessarily the rest of the engineering disciplines. So that's going to vary based off of which discipline you're applying to. For instance, it's not required in biomedical engineering. Here are the deadlines for the different programs in the SCM. There's a priority deadline of February 1st for most of the programs, with the exception of biomedical engineering, and then an April 1st final deadline. Biomedical engineering also has a spring start. For the rest of the engineering programs, it's going to be a fall start. So we already talked a little bit about your personal statement. I really want to hammer home the point about making sure that this serves as a writing sample and really represents you as a writer. Think about the questions on the screen. Why are you pursuing graduate study? Why are you pursuing graduate study now, either right after your undergraduate degree or after a few years in the workforce? What are your goals academically, professionally? How is this program and how is Brown specifically positioned to help you meet those goals? Those are all important questions you should be answering in your personal statement. Again, I really want to talk about English language proficiency exams. So if you don't speak English as a native language and you have not attended an institution where the sole language of instruction is English, we're going to need you to submit English language proficiency scores. We only accept the TOEFL and the IELTS to satisfy that requirement. So any other exams we wouldn't be able to accept to satisfy the English language proficiency requirement. You can see on the screen the recommended minimum score for students, and then also the score code if you're looking to send us your scores. Letters of recommendation, a good tip when you're asking for letters of recommendation, one, of course, ask early, ask politely, right? But then make sure you're giving them information like your personal statement and your CV or resume in order for them to write the best letter of reference possible. It helps recommenders to really be able to understand, what are your goals as you see them and how did their teaching help you in coming to the conclusion that you want to study at the graduate level. How are you in the classroom? Those kinds of things. So your CV and your personal statement can really help them kind of understand how they can help support you in that application. Ask people who are going to be supportive of you in your application. Just because you got an A in the class, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who you should be asking for a letter of reference. Who knows you best, who's taught you in the classroom, who's known you best, who's been an internship advisor. Those should be the folks who are writing your letters of reference. It shouldn't just be about what grade you got in the class. So I'm going to hand things back over to Celinda to talk about our students.
Thank you. I just wanted to give one example of a particular student spotlight. So Xiang Ning is an example of a student that studied chemical engineering in our master's program and finished last year. She chose to engage in a research thesis and studied the properties of 2D materials and films. As Kathy said in the chat, our students are amazing, and she's writing up this paper for scientific publication that herself and Dr. Hurt, whose lab she worked in, hope to submit. So this is just an example of, just one of many great students and great opportunities you can find at Brown. Next. And these are just some other examples of, quotes that have been collected from our graduates. I was a Brown undergraduate and graduate student, and I completely agree with statement one. While the faculty are amazing, honestly, the best part about Brown is the other students. The folks that Brown draws in are an amazing group of people with diverse backgrounds and interests, and so that's wonderful to engage with. Faculty and mentors are excellent. Research is engaging and even fun, as this student said. It can be a really good opportunity to engage in a research project, but again, that's not a requirement. There are other ways to really launch your career from Brown Engineering. And, we are well connected with RISD, whether you're formally doing that as in something like the MAID program, or, you just sort of engage with, RISD in other ways as just part of the community and as neighbors. And Providence is a great city to live in. It's a very creative and engaging and accessible place. And these are just some of the ways you can follow Brown Engineering on social media. But at this point, that's the end of the structured content that we have, but we'd love to answer questions that any of the attendees have. And these are some ways to get in touch with us. Master's admissions in the School of Professional Studies, if you have any issues with applying, but you can also contact the program directly. So feel free to submit questions in the chat. We can answer some of them live, or we can, type out answers. So does the computer science master's program require GRE scores? So yes, at this time, the only program that does not require GRE scores is, I guess there's more than one, MAID and biomedical engineering. Is the graduate program structured for in-person only, or is there remote flexibility? The Prime program has remote flexibility. All of our other programs are really built for in-person learning. There are very few courses in engineering at Brown that are offered remotely. We hope to develop more in the future, but right now it's mainly in-person instruction. So So I think to sum up this question, if you're already in like a master's program at another university, you can apply to the Brown program, and there's the option to transfer, I think, one course into a master's program at Brown, but you can't transfer your full, coursework from another program to Brown. So financial support, master students are primarily self-paying students. We have a very limited amount of sort of scholarship opportunity, but there are some opportunities to earn money through STAs, so supplemental teaching assistant positions or other on-campus jobs. We also try to make sure we sort of give out lists of options for outside scholarships and things like that. Master's students are primarily self-paid. There's a question about references. Is it a problem if references are not from the academic or business world? Not necessarily. If they know you well, can speak to your character and your potential to be an innovator, be a good student, things like that. I think it's most important that your references know you well and can give specific information about you. You've submitted all the application materials. How early can you get the admissions results? We do review many of them on a rolling basis, but you're way ahead of the game. I don't think we've started even the rolling piece of review yet, but we'll get on that sooner rather than later. We try to turn around decisions relatively quickly.
I think you folks are slated to start releasing decisions in late February after the priority 1 deadline. So we still got a ways to go, but yeah, that would be the soonest. And then after that, they would roll out.
They would roll.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with a higher national diploma certificate. I don't know if Victoria, you know anything.
So you can apply as long as you have the equivalent of a bachelor's degree from your home country. So as long as you're meeting the equivalency requirement, then you're eligible to apply.
Thank you. So someone is asking about robotics, that it was mentioned as a subdiscipline of electrical and computer engineering. I think so. To be honest, one of our key faculty members in robotics has a joint appointment between engineering and computer science. So robotics is accessible through both departments. I think electrical and computer engineering really is kind of the home base of something like robotics, because it brings in engineering and mechanical engineering with the computer science and the systems. But I mean, many of our researchers at Brown that are in that space have joint appointments in engineering and computer science. Post-grad, what does post-grad look like for our graduates? We have a bunch of data, but the majority of our students do go into industry. Some go on to more advanced graduate degrees, PhD programs. A few go to medical school, but most of our students find employment, within 6 months of graduating. Are there professors or labs doing research in autonomous vehicles and robotics? Not really autonomous vehicles, but robotics. Folks like Nora Ayanian. Trying to think of others. I think it's like folks like Stephanie Telix and a couple of our computer science colleagues, Ian Gonsher, in design engineering, looks at things in the robotics space. But you can, there's vivo.brown.edu is, or if you just Google researchers at Brown, Kathy or Ann can probably help me out and put it in the chat, is sort of one-stop shopping to find out about all research interests at Brown, whether in the School of Engineering or beyond. And so you can sort of type in some of the areas that you're interested in into the search bar of Vivo, and that can give you some leads on faculty studying in those areas. The average GRE score of successful candidates. I honestly don't know that information. We do try to review, we review applications holistically. So GRE scores definitely don't make or break an application. It's a data point that we like to have and we consider, but a very high score is not going to necessarily get you in, and a low score is not going to be a deal breaker if, the rest of your application is strong. And we mean that. Internship opportunity for biomedical engineering. Yes, so there is, so biomedical engineering is a little bit different than some of our other engineering programs. You can actually engage in an internship during a semester in the biomedical engineering program. We hope to expand that to some of our other programs in the future, or you can do an internship over the summer as part of a professional track in biomedical engineering. Okay, what are the opportunities for communal growth, interaction, and activities through Brown Graduate School? It's excellent. I mean, the School of Professional Studies organizes social events. The Graduate School organizes social events. The School of Engineering has a Graduate Engineering Council that throws their own events. There are also our student groups throughout Brown, which some of them are more focused on undergraduate students, but they're usually very open to graduate students as well. So those can be things like, the National Society for Black Engineers, or Brown Space Engineering, or they can be things that have nothing to do with engineering, the club volleyball team, and things like that. Our graduate students usually find really good opportunities to build community. And do we connect with other graduate programs and professional schools for events and opportunities? To some degree, yes. I think like more through sort of conference and small symposium opportunities than any other formal programs. When is best to inquire with potential supervisors? Anytime, to be honest. You can reach out now. I usually then tell people, though, if you don't hear back from someone, it's not you, it's them. Some of our faculty just won't respond to emails, but others will. And you could, reach out now and say, I'm interested in working in your lab as a master's student, and see what they're thinking. Most students will wait until they're admitted to the program and planning to come over the summer, start contacting some supervisors, and supervisors will be like aware that, there'll be an incoming class of master's students. And so that's the most typical time to start, but you can start trying to learn more about labs right now. I noticed that there are a few faculty in wireless communication, research in 5G, 6G, terahertz. So I'd say the leader in this space at Brown is Professor Dan Middleman. He's primarily looking at terahertz communication, but he has a lot of collaborators, and he would also know about other researchers at Brown in the 5G, 6G space. I know part of his rationale is that we have to keep thinking beyond 5G, that that sort of network will be saturated at some point. So he's thinking for what's the next thing and what's the next thing. What is the difference between the master's and PhD program for biomedical engineering programs? To be honest, the coursework's not all that different. That's actually true for any of the master's programs. You will probably encounter PhD students and potentially some undergraduate students in your courses as a master's student. So the coursework isn't very different. But a PhD program is really designed to for a researcher, a student, to become the expert in a particular field or a particular subfield. So the depth of exploration and independence, and the depth of research for a PhD program is different. So that's the primary difference. It's a much longer time commitment and much more in-depth research experience. I can only get my bachelor's degree in August. Will that influence my application? I might have to bump that one to Victoria about when sort of the deadlines for getting transcripts in and things like that are.
Sure. So if you can be admitted to the program, if we will need that final transcript, so it might depend on when in August. However, if you need a visa, if you're an international student, it might impact that process. So I would definitely be in touch with us sort of offline to talk that through, because there are some nuances based off of your individual circumstances.
Is systems engineering a focus embedded in any of the programs available? I would say you can think about systems engineering in any of the programs. I think the program that's most designed towards systems engineering is the design engineering master's program. It does blend in design as well, and sort of user-centered approaches, but I think there's a lot of systems thinking that's explored in the design engineering master's program. Is there any legal support for the protection of original ideas for people doing a master's degree with thesis? So yes and no. Master's students at Brown, for the most part, retain their own intellectual property. However, which is an excellent thing from a student perspective. So if you come up with an idea while you're a master's student that's patentable or something like that, you maintain the ability to patent that unless significant Brown resources were utilized to develop the idea, such as like grant funding in your research or the research lab you're working in. So if you're working on a sponsored research project with a faculty member that has, like, for instance, National Science Foundation money, that intellectual property would belong to Brown. A student would still be named on that type of intellectual property, but you wouldn't maintain the full rights to that. Is it possible to come in as a master's student, but then possibly transfer into the PhD program? Yes, though it wouldn't necessarily be a transfer. Most of the time you have to apply, like you have to complete your master's degree and then apply to the PhD program. I don't think it's never happened that, like, it's happened that somebody transfers, but it's a very rare occurrence. Most of the time you finish your master's degree and then apply to the PhD program. But we have many instances of that happening. Does Brown have some interdisciplinary programs? I'd say all of them are interdisciplinary. So something that I didn't necessarily explain all that well is the School of Engineering doesn't actually have departments at Brown. It's truly just one faculty. So all of the faculty in engineering are just School of Engineering faculty. They're not mechanical engineering faculty or biomedical engineering faculty or anything like that. So many of them wear multiple hats and do multiple, like, research across disciplines, collaborate across disciplines. And so, those research experiences really are interdisciplinary. And the electives that you have in your course, options, you can utilize those to make things interdisciplinary, especially with the support of your faculty advisor. So if you're pursuing electrical and computer engineering, but there's a materials class that would be beneficial to blending your those fields into advancing your research or advancing your knowledge, you and your faculty advisor can, develop that course plan for, your particular pursuit of the master's degree. If the area of my research interest is an overlap of a couple of programs, how do I know which program would support my research idea best? I think actually in that case, look at which classes you prefer, just because there's a couple of required courses. And because research is so interdisciplinary, like I said, the faculty member probably, has some interest in it. So in this particular example, material science and chemical and environmental engineering. If you look at our faculty lists in engineering, you'll probably see a couple of people that appear in both of those groups anyway. So you might want to look at which program course structure you like better. And that would be found in the handbook, which Kathy had shared, I think, in the chat. So I think I just answered that one, the overlap. I did my BSc in applied biology. Do I qualify to apply for chemical and environmental engineering? So possibly. It depends on what your math and maybe a little bit of physics preparation is. So usually for our engineering programs, you need to have completed math through differential equations. So you should have calculus, multivariable calculus, and some exposure to differential equations. It's helpful to have a little bit of physics under your belt as well. But it can be possible with a biology degree to be accepted into our engineering master's programs if you meet some of those other requirements. You also could potentially take a differential equations class, post-grad, to sort of beef up to improve your resume towards having that quantitative background that we typically see in engineers. Will letters of recommendation be required to be submitted before the deadline? Or can the application be submitted first? I think Victoria is typing an answer, but you can definitely submit the application first. And
Definitely.
before we'll accept you, you have to have everything. But I think there's some wiggle room with the deadline on
Definitely. There's a
letters.
little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, with the letters.
But again, the applicant, Anne just answered this really well. Yes, but your application isn't complete and won't be reviewed until it is complete. So those letters of reference, especially if you're concerned about getting your decision earlier in the spring, they should be submitted along with the application or soon after. I wouldn't wait too long to submit them. But if you submit them after the application, we'll have no issue with that.
Great. We have someone who did a bachelor's in pharmaceutical engineering. Are they eligible for biomedical engineering? Absolutely. For the most part, any engineering undergraduate degree sort of qualifies you for our biomedical engineering and most of our engineering master's programs. Usually physics, computer science, applied math, there's not too much of an issue. I think biology and chemistry, we just really want to make sure that the math preparedness is there. I just noticed that there is a participant with their hand up. I didn't know that was a thing. Sorry. So I don't know, Erin, if you took your hand out. I think you asked a question in the chat, but okay, now we have feel free to raise your hand if you would like to talk. I was missing the fact that there were people's hands raised. So feel free to raise your hand if you have further questions or type questions in the chat.
So there's a question about the GRE. What type of GRE do we require? Do we accept the at-home? Yes, we do. Same with the TOEFL. So we will accept both.
Is there somewhere I could see courses offered for a specific engineering discipline and what a potential course plan could look like? So the handbook would be one place, but you can also see some of the courses at Brown, which I think we can put that in the chat as well, cab.brown.edu. You won't have full access as a not Brown student, but you can look at which courses are offered in the engineering department on that website. So another question, no, it's fine to ask again, how much will GRE scores affect the decision. We really review applications holistically. So, if your GRE score is not, a super high percentile, but the rest of your application is very strong, your letters, you have a great chance of getting into the program. And the flip side is also true if you have excellent GRE scores, but some of your other materials lead to some question marks. Great GRE scores are not a definite acceptance either.
So there's a question, should test scores be sent during the application or after being admitted? The GRE is required for the engineering SCM so it will need to be sent at the time of application to be considered alongside all of your other admission materials.
All questions are welcome. So if you have questions, somebody else on the call might have it too. Feel free to ask.
Is there a program that focuses on sustainable development?
Not yet, but we hope to. But I think within chemical and environmental engineering, there definitely are a number of folks looking at that. We do have a brand new initiative in sustainable energy within the school, well, which is part of the School of Engineering, but also is more broad. They collaborate with chemistry, physics, earth and planetary sciences, and our Institute for Environmental Safety. So there's definitely a lot of coursework and research available in those areas. I think currently the best fit is probably chemical and environmental engineering. What if GRE scores are sent from official ETS after the deadline?
That's also fine. I would say though, like, as long if you're taking it early, send it early. I guess it depends on when you're taking the exam, but just make sure that as soon as you have your scores, you're sending them our way. If you're not sure if your scores are going to be available until after the application deadline, so you can get that decision earlier in the spring.
What happens if I don't get a response from a supervisor I have sent mail to? Does this affect my chances of admission, as the professor is the only one with research interests among all faculties? So for the master's program, you're not admitted to a particular lab. You're admitted to the program, and really like the opportunity to sort of work in a lab is kind of secured usually within your first semester. So whether or not you hear from potential research advisors, you can still be admitted to the program, but we won't be able to guarantee that you could work in that particular lab. That being said, I mean, we usually work pretty hard to find students a research opportunity that fits their interests once they are at Brown. Within reason, of course. If there's really nobody at Brown doing research in that area, there's only so much we can do. But often, if there's really only one researcher focused in that area, maybe they have some collaborate and they're just too busy. Maybe they have some collaborators in, adjacent departments or things like that. Or projects that they know they've been, collaborating on with a researcher at another school or another department. So we usually try to make it work. Can I do a straight PhD with a bachelor's degree? Yes. Admission to PhD programs are quite competitive and selective, but we have students coming to the PhD program directly from bachelor's programs all the time. Great. I think we covered a lot of ground together this evening. If there are any further questions, as Anne and Kathy have said in the chat, you can follow up with master's admissions, with student affairs in the School of Engineering, with Anne, with Kathy, with myself, with Victoria. We'd be happy to answer further questions offline.
Awesome. Thanks
Great.
so much, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy the rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.